Okay. So, everybody, thanks for joining us today for the dark web and why should you care? This is Steve Plumlee. I've got Jason Heiner who'll be helping us with any questions in the Q&A chat that'll be on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in, but we're going to address those at the end. And then I'd like to welcome Will Bishop and Katie Wallace from ID Agent and Dark Web ID to join us today and give us an overview of the dark web, how it impacts you guys on a daily basis, and some of the new tools that we've actually implemented for everybody to give you an overview of kind of what we did and why did we do it. So welcome, Will and Katie.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us today, and thank you for that introduction. So we'll dive right into it. You know, the question of the day is, you know, the dark web. Why should you care? But also, to some extent, what is the dark web? You know, that's a component of the answer that we definitely want to cover today. So, Stephen, if you'll advance the slide there, we'll kind of jump right into the presentation here. In the you know, the first point I want to make today is, you know, make no mistake about it. Cybercrime is a business. It's a thriving business, and you know the targets for the crime are you and I, and as well as businesses, and just we're all in that same group together. A lot of people think that, you know, I'm not a target. You know, I'm too small. I'm not a big business. They only go after, you know, big targets like Target, no pun intended, or Equifax, Lowe's. You know, the things that you hear that make the headlines every day in the news. But that's not all of it. There are all kinds of other breaches and attacks and cyber crimes that are perpetrated that don't make the news. You know, the lawyer's office or the law firm down the street that has a data breach and they're held ransom. They don't necessarily run to the TV station and say, hey, look what happened to us. So it's more prevalent is one point that I would like to get across than maybe people perhaps realize. And the other thing is that it's extremely lucrative. It's thriving. It's only going to get bigger. You can see on the slide there that, you know, $6 trillion is what we think the annual impact is going to be by the end of next year. That number may actually be low in light of current situations and what's happening with COVID-19 and the safer at home and quarantining and all this stuff. We've seen a huge rise in the number of attacks that are occurring and the number of just different things that are being tried, because these criminals are taking advantage of the situation. You know, what's going on in the world today. Hey, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's some panic. People don't know what to do. Maybe they've gone to their home to work. They're away from those corporate protections, and there's an opportunity there for them, and they certainly are taking advantage of it. So I want to say all that. I want to say it is ran very much like a business. If we had a screen where we could show you some shots from the dark web, you would see that they are rated there. The vendors are based on how good their products are, how responsive they are with their customers, how well they communicate, things like that. So just really want to kind of drive that point home for a minute is it is a business. It's a thriving business. It's growing, and we're all targets of it. So with that said, let's move on to the next slide. And I want to kind of move back to the beginning and let's talk about, hey, what is the dark web? Typically, when I talk to somebody about this, I'll start with that question. Hey, what do you know about the dark web? Because a lot of us know something, right? We know we saw a commercial on TV and we saw the guy standing there in front of the vending machine. And he's just pumping quarters into it, and he's pulling out driver's licenses and maybe passports and birth certificates and credit cards and, you know, just whatever he wants. And that's the impression or kind of the mental image that a lot of us have of the dark web. And it's not really not a bad example, because that is kind of what's going on. But let's talk about what the dark web is in terms of structure, where it exists, you know, kind of where it fits into the larger picture of the internet on the whole. And our purpose here is going to be, let's give you some knowledge, because, you know, a lot of us, like I was talking about, our impression or our knowledge of what's going on may be limited to this TV commercial type, you know, interpretation of what's going on. But let's get some more knowledge into your arena, so that you understand what's going on, you know what's happening, and once you understand it, you can understand that there's tools we can put in place and what happens with those. And once you know you've got some safeguards there and you know how you're going to react when you get warnings from that, you can move on to something else. Let's move on to something that's actually revenue generating for our businesses. So let's kind of go down that path. So what I would tell you about the dark web is, if we're going to put that in context, let's think about the internet as a whole, because that's where it exists. So you see on the slide there, we've got the iceberg on the left, which is, a good representation of a lot of things, because you've seen it, to represent a lot of things. But it's a great representation of what we want to talk about here today. So a little bit exposed on the top, but most of what's happening is really underneath the surface of the water. So as we look at our space there, that piece that's above the water line, the tip of the iceberg there, that's what we would call surface web. This is the internet that we know. This is the internet that we use all the time. We're using it now to transmit and do some things, to log in here. We know this. We can go search for this. It's just been a couple of weeks ago. I needed a kind of a weird part for my lawnmower. I went to a search engine. I typed in what I needed, and I found it, and I ordered it. The magic that makes that possible is indexing, and that's one of the characteristics of this surface web, if you will, that we want to talk about for just a second. Is it's indexed. We can search it. We can use browsers to do it. We all know this space. We know how it works. We know what to do with it. The messaging here also is that this surface web is just a very small piece of the totality of what's on the internet. Maybe as low as 4 to 6% are some estimates that we hear and talk about. So we know this piece. As we go down below the water line, and obviously our little brackets over there on the right of the iceberg are not to scale, and you'll realize that even more when I tell you that, as you see highlighted there in yellow, the next space we talk about is deep web, and deep web accounts for about 90% of the total of all information that's actually present on the internet as a whole. So a large space, and this area, the deep web, is not indexed. We can't go to a browser and type in lawnmower parts or whatever and find stuff down here. This is where you would find information that you don't obviously want to be searchable. You don't want people to gain access to it very easily. Typically, it's going to be residing behind a gateway. So to get to it, we're going to have to go to a portal and put in a set of credentials, a username and a password to get to it. There's a list a mile long of examples of this type of data we could share with you. So your movie queue at Netflix. Mm-hmm.
So Will, I was going to say, for our clients, this would be something like their internal SharePoint sites. Could be part of the deep web, right? Not publicly accessible. It's easily, it is indexed to some extent, but they have to have their own credentials to be able to gain access to it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Other great examples would be, your Netflix movie queue, your bank account information, your health records from your doctor's office. I know mine is going to a posture where they want you to go online and look at the notes from your visit, maybe go there to get lab results, things like that. So again, we could go on for a long time listing all kinds of specific examples of what's here in deep web. And again, the largest by far component of what's on the internet. And then just below that, the bottom of our iceberg is dark web. So this is what we're talking about and where we want to kind of focus on for a minute. So dark web's kind of a different animal. It also is not indexed. So there's no indexing available. We kind of have to know where to go and do some things to navigate down around there. But the other thing that I would tell you down here that's a very appealing characteristic is it's anonymous. We don't know who you are. We don't know what you've done, where you've been, where you're going. We don't know these things. So it's very attractive for a few reasons. And people a lot of times think about dark web and they say there's only bad things going on down there. Why don't we just shut it off? That's not the case. You can use dark web for a lot of legitimate purposes. A big one is if you think about people that are in oppressed areas of the world, so they can't get news without going through a filter of government, whatever their local government is. Maybe they're censoring it very heavily. They don't have spaces where they can go express opinions, hear other people's opinions. So, they just can't do it. Dark web's a great outlet for that. There are versions of Facebook that exist on the dark web for that reason. There's versions of newspapers and other information news outlets that exist here that people can go and take a look at. Another example might be a whistleblower situation. If you have someone that wants to, drop some information off, they don't want to be identified, they don't want to be associated, they can do that here. All the major newspapers and news outlets have drop boxes that exist out on the dark web. So that's something else people can do. But given the nature of the space and the world that we live in, bad actors are going to show up when they feel there's a space where they can go do things and not really have to be held accountable for what they're doing, and that happens here as well. So this is where you'll see people doing things like selling credit cards, selling illegal drugs, selling legal drugs, firearms, just a litany of things that we could list as well. And that happens here also. But this is also the space where the markets exist for stolen credentials. So, if you've had that breach, like we talked about at Target, Lowe's, Equifax, wherever, we can name all kinds of examples that you would probably recognize. If people want to go to market and they want to sell those, this is where they end up eventually, is in this space. And so you can kind of start to connect the dots and see that if information is showing up down in the dark web in their email addresses for addresses that exist on your business domains, we'd like to know that. There's a big value to knowing that information. And what we can do with that, obviously it's already been stolen, but when it comes for sale, we put ourselves into a position where we can get reactively proactive, if you will. We're going to react to the fact that it's showing up down here, and we're going to try to proactively get in the middle of that attack chain. So somebody buying those and turning around and saying, hey, let me try to log into some different resources you may have access to with these credential sets. So that's where the value is. We want to get that intelligence around what's going on down here, and if you will, kind of get that early warning system that that this is going on. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to my colleague Katie Wallace, and let her talk to us for just a little bit about how do your credentials come to be compromised in the first place, and then eventually end up for sale on the dark web.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Will, for explaining to us, what the dark web exactly is. Now, as we advance the slide here, I do want to kick things off and focus on phishing attacks first and foremost. Phishing attacks are a persistent threat to any business. A staggering 90% of data breaches involve phishing. Now, phishing is an attempt to acquire personal information such as those usernames, passwords, or even financial information via impersonation or spoofing through email. A little fun fact, Microsoft remains the #1 spoofed brand in phishing attacks. We've all likely received an email, that is a phishing attack, but we might have not realized it. In one popular Office 365 phishing email, a cybercriminal or a hacker sends what looks like a legitimate Microsoft email, asking the victim to open a OneDrive file or a SharePoint file. But then when the end user clicks on the link with inside that email, they're redirected to a fake Office 365 login page where the credentials that they import are then harvested by the cybercriminal. That cybercriminal then uses those credentials to commit fraud, or uses that information shared to further breach your company data, all while posting that information for sale on the dark web, that space that Will just went through with us. Another popular way that cybercriminals get your information is through malvertisements. Malvertisements is a term that you may have not heard of before. Malvertisements, though, they look like regular advertisements on the internet, but they contain a code that then attacks a visitor's system directly or redirects them to a browser to a malicious website. Malvertisement campaigns, they're attractive to cybercriminals because they can easily be spread across a large number of legitimate websites, making the end user think it's okay to click on those ads. I mean, think about it. You hop on Google and you type a quick search in for a new product or a new service. After you look through some of the results on Google, then you go on with your day, you visit other websites. But on those other websites that you visit, you are getting then sponsored ads for the product or the service that you looked up. Some of those advertisements are likely malvertisements. A great example of a malvertisement actually plagued the New York Times. They were hosting a banner ad that attempted to social engineer people into installing an antivirus tool. Unfortunately, this antivirus tool was a virus itself, but the malvertisement ad was live for upwards of 24 hours before the New York Times, a huge publication, even noticed the malicious nature of this ad and was able to disable it. Something else that I want to focus on are targeted attacks known as watering holes. A watering hole attack consists of injecting malicious code or a virus into public web pages of a site that its target visits the most. So what the cybercriminal is doing is it's watching what websites that you interact with the most on the internet. And they're trying to find vulnerabilities in those websites to see where they can put a code or a virus into scraping for your information. This code of injection, it's not new. It's commonly used by cybercriminals and hackers just because it can be spread across, again, a large number of legitimate websites easily. These styles of attacks are common for folks within the financial or the legal sector. But the last thing I want to focus on are web attacks and data breaches. It may seem like stories of data breaches are popping up more frequently in the news these days. Capital One, MGM, Grand, and Facebook are just a few companies who have fallen victim to breaches. A data breach is an incident that exposes confidential or protected information, such as email addresses, passwords, credit card details. This breach might involve even the loss of your social security number or your employee's social security numbers. A data breach can actually be intentional or accidental. A cybercriminal may hack a database of a company where you've shared your personal information. I mean, think about how many logins on the internet that you have, that you've entered in a password or your credit card information. Or an employee at your company may accidentally expose your information on the internet through a phishing attack. Either way, cybercriminals may access your key personal details and profit from that information at your expense. As we move forward in the slide presentation, I want to talk about what all of these exposed credentials mean. Remember hearing about the WannaCry virus targeting computers running on the Microsoft Windows operating system? The WannaCry virus then encrypted data and demanded ransomware payments in the form of Bitcoin to get your information back. Unfortunately, cyber attacks don't have to be as notorious as the WannaCry virus to take an entire company down. For cyber criminals, it's often like robbing a house. Although big mansions or big organizations likely have more data, you have to think those large organizations, they have different security systems in place. A burglar looking for an easy target will look at small to medium-sized businesses. You have information on your customers and your employees that all has a price tag on the dark web. So they're going to start using your exposed information against you to start getting into the different tools and services that you utilize. Fortunately, ransomware and data breaches, they're a huge security problem for any size organizations. As we move forward, I want to talk about how our customers and employee data is the #1 target. Companies serving customers have the responsibility to keep their data safe. And keeping private information secure, it's an expectation and in some cases the law. So when personal information is compromised, customers feel violated. A simple data breach can put your firm's or your company's reputation at stake, causing your clients to turn to other service providers. For small to medium-sized businesses, this can be costly. And data breaches can not only bruise your company's reputation, but they can also be financially draining. Data breaches, on average, can cost a company around 7 days worth of downtime. Also, depending on your company and the data that you guys have, you may also fall in line with some of the regulatory laws or the compliance laws. For example, companies that handle customer financial information are required to be PCI compliant. Non-compliance can lead to even farther and larger fines, up to thousands and even hundreds of dollars. So you have to think about, coupled with downtime and the different fines that you could receive from going through a data breach, it can all be financially draining for your organization. With that being said, I now want to turn things back over to Steve and let him take it from there.
Cool. So, in terms of the securing the business, right? We are essentially have implemented for everybody dark web ID for the sole purpose of making sure that we're actually trying to collect this information ahead of time. From our side, this information is automatically ticketed. Some of you may have already seen some of those since we've turned that on. I know we've got a number of hits. So those that are using this new service that we've got, should be seeing some of the benefits already. One of the things that I would encourage everybody to do is also consider having us add your personal email addresses into the system. That's a feature that I think Jason will touch on a little bit later, but we have the ability to add in, if you have family members or your home email addresses that you want to track as well, we can add that in as part of our search as well. And just to give everybody kind of an idea, the last spec we pulled was as of the first, we had 618 detected compromises. So, it is an effective approach. There's been a number of times that I've had conversations with folks previously. We had a couple early adopters on this, and there were more than a few occasions where I'd go pull the ticket up and have a conversation with that individual about what their password was, and are you still using it, and the look of horror on their face when they realize, oh my gosh, I am still using that password. And then we immediately jump into making the change and making sure that any other places those passwords are used are getting changed as well. And as a side note, one of the benefits of this, should you have this, is if this can also help along the lines of using a password manager. In the cases, a lot of times people are reusing passwords, and the detection is one thing, but another way to help mitigate this problem across the board is not to use password reuse. And I don't know if Will or Katie have any good juicy details for incidents they've run into with their large client base as well. But I've found that it's a lot easier to manage when you only have to change it in one place as opposed to having to change it in 20 or 30 different places.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of on point with what you're talking about, and dovetailing in with using a password manager, we communicate internally. We've kind of got a channel where we share these kinds of things. We know that through studies that 76% of people reuse the same password, or they use a variation of a password. So when I say variation, they put 1, 2, 3 behind it, or an exclamation point, or whatever the case may be. And when you do that, I've sat with our developers and talked before. When you do that variation, a lot of times that 1, 2, 3, or the 1, or whatever you're doing, it's essentially no different than using the exact same password that you already had. There's software out there that allows the hacker to automate the guessing of all those different possible combinations and variations, and it's very good. It's very, very good, and it's very affordable. So the password manager can put you in a position where you actually have unique passwords for everything. You have complex passwords. You have a very easy way to change those. And we definitely hear some horror stories. I'll share just really quick. We had an organization that we had ran a dark web scan against them. They had a result pop up, and they kind of dismissed it out of hand just right away and said, hey, that's for an employee that doesn't work here any longer. And the partner we were working with asked the question. They said, hey, would you mind if we took the credentials that are exposed, so the email address and the password, and try them at a couple of places? And they agreed. So they started asking questions about, hey, what did this person do? What were their job responsibilities? And it turned out she had access to, she was an HR person, and she had access to some things. But one thing they found was those credentials worked at Staples. You could log in, and there was an active credit card associated with the account. They were unaware she had been ordering office supplies at some point. They forgot to turn that off when she left the organization. But the thing that was more concerning was she had those credentials worked at Dropbox. And what the employee was doing was she was trying to do a good job. She didn't maybe necessarily trust the backup scenario that was in place at work. So just to make sure she had all the information she needed in the event that there was some kind of data loss, she had gone to Dropbox and created a document for every single employee that had ever been there during her tenure. And it had, names, address, pay rate, social security, date of birth, everything that she would possibly need. And it was all exposed publicly on the dark web through those credentials. So, yeah, as you see these results, they're good reflection points to think about a lot of things, what you're doing with passwords, where you've used those passwords, and make sure you've got that in hand.
Yep. There's never ending number of scenarios that can pop up. That's for sure. So we've got a couple questions. Let's go ahead and take a peek at that. Jason, do you want to run through some of those, and then we can kind of all chip in on responses?
Sure. So the first question you've already touched on was about, can personal emails be monitored? And I'll take this one, because yes, they can. We can add those to your account. I want to say several of our employees internally have added their personal emails to the account, and yes, that is something that's included in your dark web ID service. So the answer to that one is yes. The second question, and this will be to the panel, is from a future cyber criminal, it appears, and they're curious where one obtains the specialized browsers to navigate the dark web. And I tease, but the question is real.
So yeah, you can. Those are called onion browsers primarily. So the onion browser essentially gives you access to those locations. I wouldn't recommend necessarily poking around down there. There's a lot of not only questionable stuff, but also a lot of disturbing stuff that can be there. And granted, there may be some things of value, but the reality is that you've got to be diligent whenever you dive into the dark web. Just to put it directly, I wouldn't use your main computer to go visit the dark web just to see what's there. You should basically have a machine you're completely happy to toss out and start over again. So I think there's an added part to that question. Will, did you have any opinions on the diving into the dark web?
Yeah, I do. I would agree with what you said wholeheartedly. I've actually talked to somebody recently that they wanted me to see if I could get them some help on how to navigate. I'm going to get on the dark web, period. How do I find different things? And reluctantly, I posed the question internally to our developers. They flat refused to be any part of it, because you really have to know what you're doing when you get down there. The example they gave me was, somebody could, just for fun, while you're connected, potentially get you to click somewhere and download a bunch of content to your machine that'll get you in trouble, potentially with law enforcement, and then maybe turn you in. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy things that could happen. But to kind of flip the coin over and say this, I read an article right before Christmas last year, a few months ago now, but the title of the article was "Have Your Kids Been on the Dark Web?" which just caught my attention. And because I wanted to know why, what are they doing? But the article was saying, hey, there's an alarming number of teens that actually, they're doing a little bit of research, getting the browsers they need, getting a VPN connection. They're connecting and they're ordering fake IDs and different things that kids would get into. So, by the same, I would say don't go there. That's my strong recommendation. But on the other side of the coin, you can do a little research and figure out how to put it together.
Yep. And then there's a follow-up question that I think they were also asking, which was their approach to phishing emails, right? So their approach is to examine the original email address, make sure that it's actually coming from the company that they are believing it's from. And in their comment, they're saying that, usually they'll determine that it's not from the claim company. And then 2, rolling over the links. Not clicking on them, just pointing at the links to see where that link is going, right? Is that a good approach? So from a management standpoint, absolutely, that is the right approach. The other thing I would encourage is, especially when you're on like a mobile device, it's not always clear how to see a link from your mobile device. And just remember, mobile devices are also just as susceptible to being taken over and used against you by clicking on bad links. So one of the things that I've always recommended doing is, if you're not sure, just go to the page that it claims to be coming from. So if it's a link from LinkedIn, okay, saying you've got a new posting on LinkedIn that, or a new email from LinkedIn saying that someone's invited you to connect with them. If you're on your mobile device and you're not 100% sure, the safer route is just open the mobile browser and go to LinkedIn directly, or open the LinkedIn app and then go to the inbound request section and find that type of thing. And that way you don't inadvertently get your phone infected, because that is a new target vector that we've been seeing more of. And at least, even though if they do have antivirus for them, I find that they tend to be a little harder to guarantee that they're actually protected. That's just my personal opinion at this stage. I haven't seen anything that really I feel confident about that mobile antivirus scanner is actually doing anything of value.
Just to jump in on that, Steve, I actually had, now this was a training phishing email this morning. And basically, as they outline here, is my basic approach as well, right? I look and see who it's coming from. If it looks to be correct, I'll roll over the link. But I was on my phone, and it was a convincing email. It appeared to be an internal email. And had I clicked on it in the link, I believe it said it was from HR at Certified. Had I clicked on that link, I would have, in this case, failed the test. So I did go back and jumped on the machine to check and rolled over, and that's where it revealed. So part 2 of your question there, rolling over the link, and it revealed that it was not from, who it said it was from. So moving on there, so we have a couple more questions posted. I'm going to jump on one. So should I be worried about additional exposure on the dark web after having my domain scanned?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and I'll jump in on this one. So the data that we are pulling is considered publicly available information. So you should not have any concerns that this information that we're presenting you will lead to any further vulnerabilities. Our analysts do not know who our partners are, do not know who clients are. They're just pulling in credible exposures that were found out there on the dark web and placing it out there for awareness and no other purpose.
All right. Next question, moving forward. How does this service help protect my organization?
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
I was going to say, we kind of went through that a little bit in the slide deck there, and it's just I would view it as an intelligence source. It's information we can gather that's going to give us a heads up in regards to credentials that are compromised, and put us in a position again to be reactively proactive and go change those credentials to potentially get in the middle of any kind of attack chain that may be going on.
All right.
So what password manager would we recommend? And is Google, I assume you mean like the Chrome browser, safe to generate and save passwords within the browser?
So yeah, are we talking about Google, the Google browser? Because I know we had a couple questions about password managers in general. I was trying to read through some of these questions on the backside to make sure we put them together.
Sure.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, yes, I read the question as, do we recommend a password manager outside of the, the Chrome or other browser offered, service that pops up when you put in a new password?
Well, I think it depends on your use, right? So if you've got it depends on how you're protecting your data and what are you looking for in that password manager. You know, is the built-in Google storage safe to use? Sure, but that's kind of a loaded question, right? Are you using two-factor authentication on your Google account, right? If you've got the multi-factor authentication where it's pinging your phone and saying, did you just log into this browser? That's going to be a lot more secure than if you're using password 1 as your password for your Google account. You know, if that's the case, then you know, I wouldn't recommend having them in that account. So you know, there's a bunch of different ones out there. You know, the one we use internally right now is called RoboForm. You know, it's got the ability to generate passwords, allows you to save it. It works on multiple platforms. It works on a mobile device as well as it does on a PC or a Mac. There's other things like Passportal. There are things like LastPass. That's another common one that's out there. You know, there's the built-in ones that are in the browsers. It depends on how you're protecting your information. I think more having it with, usually there's some amount of logging that, so you can tell someone has access to your information from. So it might have a little more of a feature set than some of the ones that are kind of built into the browsers. And let's see. So I'm going through the other questions we've got here. Let's see, typically the emails I get are not from any provider or website that I ever access, which is usual tip-off. Yep, good point. A lot of them are pure garbage. Don't hesitate to mark those as spam. If you're in Outlook, you just right-click on those and you can mark them as junk. Let's see, here's a post for, do you find using products like security keys via flash drives or two-factor authentication is useful? If so, can you give some recommendations on which ones to use? Sure. So there, again, there's a bunch of different options out there. Yes, I absolutely recommend using some kind of two-factor tool, whether that's something like a YubiKey, which is a USB key that plugs into the side of your laptop in order to both enable the system to turn on, as well as access sites, websites, or other services, or whether you use something like Microsoft Authenticator, which is a time-based numerical authenticator that also ties into Office 365 and can give you automatic push notifications. So if you're logging into your Office 365 account, the Microsoft Authenticator can receive a prompt. There's also third-party items like Duo. We've been doing a lot of implementation with Duo. That gives you the ability to get a push notification to your phone and actually lock out your workstation as well. So if you've got a regular Windows machine, that'll actually give you the ability of having a two-factor prompt before you can even log into the computer. So depending on the needs, depending on whether you have compliance requirements, we'll kind of change what type of multi-factor you would want to use. And we can definitely talk through that in detail if you want to reach out to us. Happy to chat about that. But I would say definitely anything that provides two-factor, absolutely use it, even for personal stuff. I think anymore, you just have to have at least a code or at a bare minimum, getting a text message sent to your phone. But just be aware that even those are now a target. It is possible to clone a phone under the right circumstances and then receive copies of those text messages as well. So the standalone multi-factor tool is definitely the app running on the phone or a separate key is definitely a much more secure option than getting a text message, which could be redirected to another location. So
just to tag on to that,
Yep.
it is very easy, especially for personal stuff. Just Google offers one, Microsoft offers one. They generally all work the same. I think eBay has it, PayPal has it. I can't remember exactly what I have on my phone, but a lot of my personal stuff I have under MFA just for that reason. And it's very easy. It's in the same place on your phone all the time. And the way that works for anybody who hasn't done it, it'll generate a 6-digit code generally, and they're timed to 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds or every whatever the time interval is, they will reset, right? They're good for that 30 seconds. So they're very easy to use. Again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out and we can help you with that.
So there's another good one in here. I'll go ahead and hit the publish button on it so it pops up in the list for everybody. But someone was asking, this is a good one for Will or Katie, what happens once you find an exposure? Are you able to remove that data from the dark web?
Yeah,
I know that's not what you guys do, but you may have some ideas about that.
I do. It's actually a topic I can spend the rest of the afternoon probably talking about, but I'll condense it way down before anybody gets, don't get too excited. We're not going to do that. What I would tell you is, once you have an exposed credential, the default reaction that I hear from a lot of people is, okay, let's just go change that password. And you absolutely want to change that password, but I would say, hey, stop for a minute and let's understand a couple of things before we change the password. And the first thing I would say is directly to your question, is that there's no way to remediate that. There's no way to remove that information from the dark web. It's there and it's always going to be there. And it's actually going to get worse over time in terms of that exposure, because they're going to sell that list or sell that information over and over and over again. I've got screenshots I've seen from the dark web where they're selling one of the largest databases that's ever been exposed, and you can buy chunks of it for $10 a piece. It's broke up into 5 pieces. You can have the whole thing for $50. I've also seen, to kind of tie that together, some of the salaries they pay or that they advertise they're paying to people that'll go to work for them as programmers. And I would just tell you, if they're going to pay these salaries, they got to sell a lot of units at $50 a piece. So I say that to just say more and more people are going to have the information. So not only can we not remediate it, it's going to get worse in regards to the amount of exposure that's associated with it, the number of eyes that are on it. So understand that. The other thing I would tell you is, let's have a conversation around what good passwords look like. Current NIST recommendations are long passphrases potentially that are easy for you to remember, but they're very long. And then the second part of that recommendation is, once you've got a good password, let's monitor it so that we know, we'll have an indication of when there's a compromise associated with it. I can have the best key to the front door. I can have the best lock on my front door that there ever was, and it's just fantastic. But if there's somebody at the end of the block handing out keys to it, it's suddenly useless. And the same type of thing applies. So I'd say understand, what the exposure looks like, what it looks like to create good passwords. And once we're armed up with that information, let's go change the password at that point. So that's the answer at the end of the day. That's the short answer.
Yeah, it's definitely what I've seen as well, that it is becoming more and more of a business, right? Albeit in most countries an illegal business, but almost operating as a business nonetheless. I was at a InfraGard event, and they had actually had a really neat graphic with the layout of an illegal organization, right? And it looked like a regular org chart that you'd see in any business.
Yep.
So I'll have to dig that up. We'll throw that up as a post at some point on the website, because it was definitely a neat graphic. So
yeah, I've seen that as well. It's a scary graphic to me. I mean, it's frightening, the amount of organization. I mean, it's truly organized crime.
Yep. Cool. Does anyone have any last questions? Otherwise, I know we're coming up on about an hour. I want to make sure we get everybody answered that had any questions. And I'll take this time to thank everybody that came to attend. This is our inaugural webinar, so thanks for bearing with us as we kind of get everything moving. And hopefully it had some good information for everybody as well. And I'll go ahead and stay on here for a minute to see if there's any last posts. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up here in a minute.
Yeah, as well, Will and Katie, we really appreciate you guys taking your time help inform.
To participate today. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Yep. Thanks.
All right, guys. To any attendees that are left, hopefully we'll be having more of these in the future. We'll send out the information as we put them together. We appreciate you guys coming, and until next time.